Welcome to the Gus Alva Perspective, a video cast that's earmarked to embrace and adopt a mindset of gratitude and abundance over what's oftentimes encountered, and that being fear and scarcity. The topic that I'd like to touch on right now with you is one that unfortunately is all too common: divorce. Divorce happens to be something that in the past may have been a rarity, but has now become more of a commonality. And it's kind of crazy to think about this, but one of the institutions that we've had for a long time where there's this union between a couple in which they think about, procreating a family and then subsequently meeting all of the different vicissitudes of life together can get to a place in which individuals have discord to the degree that they can no longer live with one another. Now, obviously, no one should be having to live within a household in which there's discord and there can't be commonality. But it's almost shameful that at the present time, when we take a look at the statistics, over half of the marriages that initiate end up dissolved and divorced. And worse yet is the reality that the family law system in the US is so disjointed that it's now become a feeding trough for so many different individuals. I happen to be a board certified psychiatrist, and I end up dealing with a lot of different themes, specifically stemming from affective problems, depression, anxiety, or the exacerbation of faulty behaviors like the abuse of substances to deal with some of the fallout associated with difficult situations in life, including the stressors of going through a divorce. And so it's not an uncommon theme that I run into. I wish that I could say that I didn't have experience in this, but unfortunately, I too have had firsthand experience in this arena. And maybe I should start there. I came from a household and a family with a mindset that only losers would actually get a divorce. And when I experienced some difficulty in my own marriage and couldn't get through, despite the fact that there were attempts at counseling and therapy and so on, obviously if two people aren't pulling in the same direction together, then basically placating the situation and dissolving that would make the most sense. There is a silver lining to this, and this is part of the issue associated with that gratitude mindset. If you were to see me at the present time, I could literally tell you that mulligans, a term that I am borrowing from golf, where if you hit the ball very poorly and you request a mulligan, you're allowed a second shot at doing things. And that second shot can sometimes be quite helpful, right? And it can be affirming in life. In fact, I would say that the mulligan that I took in life in going through a divorce and then subsequently meeting my soulmate was probably one of the best things that could have occurred to me. However, being deep into the process in and of itself was exceedingly painful and exceedingly problematic. Let me share with you where that comes from, because once you've lived through something, it's more than just hearing about things. So I never quite knew how involved the system was, as is the family legal law system. There's an interesting book by a very famous actor who unfortunately right now has been charged with involuntary manslaughter charges, Alec Baldwin, when he was married to his then wife, Kim Basinger, another very famous actress. He basically, created this storyline whereby there was this feeding trough where everybody came and fed off of it. And I was actually taken quite aback by the very harsh reality that he was depicting in that particular book. And then going through the experience myself, I actually found that he was actually exposing a truism, and the harsh clarity is that there is an abundance of predators that reside within this particular area that are more than willing to take advantage of the individuals that are going through divorce proceeding. Obviously, anybody, if they're contemplating the possibility of divorce, should first exhaust every potential venue. And that's where psychotherapy, couples therapy are going to be very productive. In fact, the majority of churches at the present time, or different institutions that will be marrying couples, will usually say, hey, you have to take a course in whether it be theology or ethics or otherwise, to make sure that you're making a decision that makes sense for you both, because we don't want you ending up with failure. And ultimately, the reason for going into a marriage is to try to create a productive and proactive union whereby the two individuals are actually heightened in reference to their life experience, as opposed to exposing themselves to a lot of hurt. But the reality is that the more you give and the more you lose, once something gets severed, the greater the pain that one experiences. Ultimately, also, what we know is that, particularly in California, where there's like a no-fault state scenario, it doesn't matter who did what. It just simply matters that if the individual that has been the main provider within the household is typically going to be having the target on their backside. And unfortunately, oftentimes the concept of mediation isn't necessarily one that's embraced. People are hurt. People feel slighted. People have narcissistic injuries whereby now they want to dole out pain onto the other individual. And whereas before there were caring, loving feelings towards someone else, now there's a lot of animosity and a lot of poison that gets built up into individuals. That poison, unfortunately, becomes self-consuming. Individuals oftentimes become depressed. When anger gets swallowed inward, it turns into depression and anxiety. And oftentimes that's where I end up having to help out a lot of individuals that come in seeking out my help. But the flip side of that also is really seeing how somebody can become victimized based on going through this whole issue. Oftentimes, the first call that's being made when mediation isn't necessarily an option is arranging for legal counsel, an attorney. And the typical question that's oftentimes posed is, well, I'd like you to send me over your bank statements. I want to see what your worth is. And then subsequently, that's typically the litmus test by which the individual is going to be being charged X amounts of money in representation. The process also is unfortunately lengthy, because there's so many individuals that are going through divorce that the court systems are oftentimes flooded by different cases. And the judge or the commissioner that's residing over the case oftentimes is simply waylaying time and basically stating, what, we're going to wait until X amount of time to rehear this case. And oftentimes the individuals that are the active individuals are oftentimes asked last as to whether the time frames in which different audiences with the courts to hear the case that's before them are asked last, right? So typically it'll be the judge or commissioner that says, well, we can delay this case until, this date. And then subsequently he'll ask the other, he or she will ask the attorneys that are representing the individuals that are obviously in conflict. And then lastly, the individuals that are in conflict will actually get asked as to whether those dates are convenient or not. And just going to a courthouse is a strain in and of itself. Spending the entire day there, spending money on so-called experts, whether it be, public accountants that are doing a forensic assessment of the couple, or the experts that are brought in particularly when children are involved, to gauge the appropriateness of each one of the individuals for parenting. Part of the problem, as stated previously, is that if you don't have that bullseye on your back, you're oftentimes being given a higher custodial ability with the children. And oftentimes the whole notion of the venom and the acrimony that arises from a couple that previously were loving now becomes problematic, in that accusations fly, and all of a sudden the appropriateness of each one of those parents for that child now gets called to question. Having the scrutiny of other individuals to oversee whether the conduct during exchanges in time become suspect. And obviously, there's this continued situation where individuals are spilling out copious amounts of money that they've taken a long time to accrue, but now money that is flooding out at a rapid pace. And obviously, that strain from a financial perspective can become just overwhelming for individuals. It oftentimes leads to despair. It oftentimes leads to questioning the sanity associated with wanting to maintain a relationship with family. And again, responsible parents will obviously always do whatever it is that they can do, but the heaps of humiliation and the heaps of different types of struggles that they experience by going through this process can be taxing literally on anybody. So oftentimes the custodial times that people experience are going to be hinging upon financial considerations. The whole notion of a 50-50 custody is oftentimes so foreign because different monies are involved. And if the system truly were fair, maybe a different metric would be utilized. But the sad reality is that oftentimes people just get stuck in this situation where maybe a divorce should take 6 months. Oftentimes it drags out to 6 to 10 years. And in that meantime, obviously there's that continued expenditure over the experts that are being utilized, the legal counsel, the utilization of the courts, the bailiffs, the secretaries, the time that is spent with going back and forth, and the loss of productivity that people have, as well as the emotional toll that it exacts from individuals. So the interesting thing is that divorce, unfortunately, is such a problematic issue that maybe there should be additional time spent before somebody is actually going to be considering getting married. And then subsequently, after, say, a marriage is dissolved, if the spouse that wasn't necessarily contributing as much as the other is now facing a situation that, for example, in the state of California, if you're married beyond 10 years, you have to marry or you have to pay a spousal support. And that spousal support is unfortunately for life. So talk about a situation that really is problematic. That's a legalized form of indentature. So it's literally, slaving away for the rest of your life to pay someone else for a quote unquote mistake that was made over the course of a lifetime, unless the individual happens to then remarry. At that point, that individual would lose that spousal support. Reality, however, is that because of the financial compensation, even if somebody is partnered in with someone else, they know that so long as they don't remarry, they continue to draw on that financial recompense from having been married previously. So, it's an unfortunate situation. And I think that maybe a reconsideration of the legal system, particularly within the family system, might actually help offset some of the crazy behavior that we sometimes see. Like I said, the important thing, though, is that one can certainly consider a mulligan. And anticipate that things happen for a reason, and to know that maybe something better is coming down the line, to not neglect the responsibilities that one has accrued. If one has sired children, obviously it's key and primordial to always care for them as best as possible. But in addition to that, during those difficult times, that's when people can adopt healthier behaviors, not faulty behaviors like, say, excessive drinking and otherwise, which oftentimes people will do, but maybe enhancing their overall exercise. I'll tell you, I can draw back from my own personal experience. I started running marathons during that turbulent time for me, and that was helpful for me because running long time intervals allowed me an opportunity to get in my head and process information and then be able to plan appropriately for things to do. But everybody handles things differently. And when we talk about the potential for a fear and scarcity mindset, divorce is one of those things. There's no way I'll ever get married if now I'm facing the likelihood of not only seeing a dissolving of this relationship, but also being penalized on top of that from the gains that I've made. Well, that's the wrong way of thinking about it. But the one thing that we can be honest about is to say, this institution of marriage has been around for a long time. This is the bedrock for the foundation of family. It's the right thing to do, but I want to make sure that I'm making this decision the right way. And to step into it with a mindset of gratitude. But even if something goes astray, goes awry, there's always that maybe this is my mulligan to now get a better shot of life. Some interesting musings. I appreciate you joining us on the Gus Alva perspective, but this is a theme that has been, unfortunately, weighing heavily because I've just seen so many different patients coming in with the same complaints and wanted to share some thoughts with you. Thank you for joining us.